Have you ever been sitting on your couch with something in your hands that you just wanted to put down? Is the end table way too far? Don't want a coffee table taking up a lot of room in your living room? Me either. But what's the answer? Was this you? It was me. So I thought about it, and I think I have the answer. I envisioned a long, skinny table that would go right behind my couch, complete with power and USB charging ports, of course. First, I needed to sketch out my plan. I take some measurements and thought about the different ways that we would use the table and where would be the best place to put everything. Then I made a complete cut list. A list of every single cut I planned to make and exactly how much lumber I would need to make all these cuts. Then, it's time to get to work. I drew inspiration from some recent work I did. The wife wanted these faux wood beams covering large pass-throughs in our living room, so I made them, complete with the fancy metal bands. I didn't stop there though. I also built a mantle to cover the plain brick that we had, and then I coated it in a lot of poly. I built the frame out of 2x4s. Nothing fancy, just sturdy, enough to hold some weight. To start, I marked off all the cuts that I planned to make on each board. This took a little bit of time. Then I moved outside each and every board and made all the cuts. All the cuts. Next, I drilled pocket holes for most of the joints. The planned unit was small. It was only going to be about 7 inches wide, but it would be almost 10 feet long. So I needed room for the power drop-ins, and I didn't want the thing to sag over time, so I had the 2x4s of the frame facing out, as you see here, kind of standing on each other. I laid everything out in the largest flat surface I had, my dining room floor. Then I went about screwing it all together. With one done, now I made a second one the exact same way. Now I have 2 frames, and I needed to join these 2 together. So I had cut out these shorter, roughly 4-inch pieces, and I wanted to put in 2 power drop-ins. So I divided the entire length by 3 and put in support braces around where I planned to put the power drop-ins. I know it's a little bit of overkill, but I wanted it to be rock solid, and I did not want any sag at these joints. So there were going to be 3 sections of the cedar over the top here, with a joint, 2 joints that would be covered by this drop-in power grommet. It's just drill and screw. The brace structure is complete and it's ready for a shell now. I measured out for all the cuts on the face boards, this cedar here, and then I went outside and just made a bunch of cuts. Not as many as the 2x4s, but a few. Now I needed a template for the drop-ins. It's a little hard to transfer this shape directly to the wood, so I used this piece of cardboard. I cut a small hole that I could feed the power cord through, so I could then trace the bottom of the unit onto the cardboard. Whoa, almost dropped it there. Not to worry though, it still works. I tested it later. After tracing the bottom, I noticed that one of the sides was flat on the grommet here. So after I pulled the cord back out and laid it down, I went ahead and rounded this off because it flares back out again near the top of the collar. Although in retrospect, I could have probably just used a router to chamfer the edge a little bit. But it fits great, and there's no need to really make this overcomplicated. This is just a simple project. You can see here the little chamfer. Back to the template. Just cut it all out. Slide that power cord right back through. And look at that, perfect fit. I have to find the center of the board. Subtract the diameter of the hole from the width of the board, split the difference, and do a little math. Use those measurements to then trace the holes onto the board twice. I also like to label the boards underneath so I know what side meets what other side. I have the holes of the grommets lining up with where the ends of the boards meet. This makes it easier to cut with the jigsaw so I don't have to drill a hole and then cut a hole. It also makes it easier to hide these joints. If there was one joint for two boards in the middle, then I would have to cut out the holes and you'd still have a joint. If I had the means, I would have just bought a 12-foot board and been done with one long uncut board. But this was more cost effective than renting a truck or having a single board delivered, and I was using leftovers from previous projects, so it was cost effective. Now I'll just nail down the boards to the frame. I had to lay the whole thing down to get the right angle on the lower ones there. Once the sides are on, the top gets nailed down too. I eyeballed it, but I tried to keep the nails even and symmetrical as possible, hitting all the corners and then a few down the middle and ones on the ends. They won't be seen too much as I come back through and hit them all with the nail set to bury the heads, but all the same, it looks better than it just being random. Before I can get a good color on this unit, it needs to be sanded down well. I went over and over with this 80 grit, then I went to 120 to finish. I think I probably could have stopped at the 80 grit. After wiping it down, it's time for stain. I only did one coat because this is so dark. We went with a dark walnut like all the faux wood beams and the mantle. My wife picked this stain color originally to contrast with the white brick and the light gray walls that we have in the living room. So we used it again on this project. We as in I. Now that it's dry, I'll give it a quick dusting with the old dry brush here, and then it's time to coat with poly. I use a triple thick poly and coat it on, well, thick, but not running or dripping, being sure to watch for bubbles and drips. It looks like frosted glass at first, but it will dry clear. Just brush it on and trust it. I worked in 5 sections, the 2 sides and the 3 sections on top, making sure to finish with long, smooth strokes, and again, long, smooth strokes down the entire length. Nothing fancy about this electrical. No wiring to do or anything. These just plug into a small power strip, which then plugs into the wall. Once it's all done, we have 2 outlets and 2 USB ports on either end of the couch, all reachable from nearly wherever you sit. I'm happy with this, and I think it turned out great. We get lots of use from it, and most people don't even know it's there until you point it out, and then they're just thoroughly impressed. I had fun doing this too, and I hope you got some inspiration out of it as well.